We okay? Right, thank you all for coming. We're really lucky to have Dom Turner and Tony Wheeler here with what would be a really unique, I think, Australian form of the blues. Okay, so with Dom as one of our sort of leading blues guitarists in Australia and works with the Common Mamas in the US and has a very sort of Piedmont tradition blues, works with Phil Wiggins and a very exciting sort of blues sound. And working here with Tony Wheeler would be one of Australia's leading exponents on the Chinese chin, which in a sense it has a very similar sort of quality to the blues guitar in terms of slides and sort of going inside the note. You know, rather than just like a piano where you play the notes, in the chin tradition and coming from the Confucian gentleman, you go inside the sound and bend and pluck and change and get the vibration of the sound within the chin, and that works very well for the same sort of techniques that you get in the guitar, and particularly, you know, with you can see on Dom's finger there with coming out of the bottle neck techniques where you slide down, just grab the beer bottle and slide down, and this has become more formalized into this round your little pinky, and you get these amazing sounds and bends and slides inside the sound. So it seems a perfect combination to put these two types of sounds together. And what you get is this sort of very sort of distilled, almost Confucian Chinese sort of savouring of the moment of sound, marrying with the blues grip from Dom, and it's a very exciting sort of, I think, Australian form of the blues. So if you could please give these guys a welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming along, and thank you, Bruce, for the lovely introduction. I'm just going to talk just a little bit about what the hell we're doing here. What was that all about? And then also we'll play another piece, and then Tony's going to talk a little bit about the gujin, and then we'll do a couple more pieces. But so basically, I'm doing a DCA here at Western Sydney University, but I've got like 35 years history in the music industry in Australia, mainly travelling around Australia doing music festivals with my main group, which is called the Backsliders, which is like a blues-based band that sort of began doing early 20th century blues music from the South of America in particular, but has sort of morphed into something that we write a lot of our own songs, and it's probably a lot more heavier sort of genre that we play now. But somewhere around about, was the early 1990s, I can't remember exactly, either somebody handed me an old VHS cassette or I saw it on television, but I saw a gujin player, and immediately I loved it straight off, and I could also see the connection with some of the early 20th century music, in particular the music of Blind Willie Johnson and Mississippi Fred McDowell, who are all slide guitar players. So, of course, I'm playing slide guitar here mainly, but the key point of the whole concept is the microtone, the notes between the notes. So it's those notes there. And in blues music, and I believe in most kind of vernacular music forms, the microtone, the purpose of it is to create emotion and also to replicate the human voice, and also kind of ambient sounds as well. So it's really the kind of the voice of the blues, along with the harmonica as a similar instrument in that it bends notes and does microtones. But I immediately saw the connection, as you can probably hear, between what we're playing, Tony's playing essentially 2,000-year-old music form, and I'm playing a music form that goes back to the US, but then goes further back into Africa as well, with various microtonal instruments there. So that was the first thing that I heard. And then secondly, somewhere in the mid to late 1990s, when I was doing work as an English language teacher, an international student from Korea arrived one day to class with what looks a similar instrument, kalmongol, Korean instrument, a long wooden one, and with a similar concept, but rather than sliding the notes like Tony does, this instrument works on a series of frets, and the strings are pressed down. Again, it's really microtonal. And so I ended up recording with this musician. So anyway, those two events, and plus my own kind of research and travelling a lot to, at that time, Southeast Asia, in particular Vietnam, led me to want to do lots of cross-cultural projects. And so, bring us up to a few years ago, I started the doctorate here with the aim of connecting up. Well, it's got a few aims. One of them is the overhanging grit amongst all of these music forms. And by grit, I'm not only referring to like distorted sound like I'm using, but it's also things like extraneous string noise that you can hear when Tony plays. You'll hear the scratching of the strings and the moving of the fingers. I'm including all of that. I'm also including, the sounds of rooms and the resonance they make as part of grit. You can hear this particularly on blues recordings. And the human voice, the way people get grit in their vocals, etc. So my thesis is about connecting up these forms. So what I've done is I've done the first part of it, which is the recording project. The first step was I recorded with Tony, and we did it completely improvisationally, and then I went back and mixed it and sort of edited slightly in parts. That will be released in the future. We're really happy with that. And when Bruce sent around the advertising for this, he included a film clip that we did for a track we called The Death of Hound Dog Taylor, who's a blues musician, and had some imagery from a friend of mine, Reg Mombassa, who's an artist. So we combined the whole thing into this little clip. So that was the first part. and thankfully this relationship's carried on. And then the second part, I went to America last year and recorded in Mississippi with a gospel group in a style that it's almost a little bit of a lost form from one particular area where at one point they used bottleneck slide guitar in church as part of gospel music. And that's since the death of Mississippi Fred McDowell in the 70s, that kind of stopped. So my aim there was to record with people in that tradition and reintroduce the instrument, which I did. And then the second part was to go to Toledo, Ohio, to record with some musicians there for a form of music. It's called Sacred Steel, again from the church. I'm not a religious person, but I think that the churches are really nurturing music throughout the US. So it's an African American church culture where they play slide guitar, but over the lap style slide in church, very loud. And I recorded there with a group of musicians there, the Brown sisters, Nikki Brown and her sisters. We recorded albums coming out on the 5th of May, and I'm touring them here in May this year. I also went to New Haven, Connecticut, and recorded with a Korean musician who's playing the kamungo instrument. Again, something that will be released. So all of these projects basically are kind of linking up this blues form that goes back to Africa and goes back further through the microtone, looking at microtonal instruments, as well as looking at the grit, how grit holds the whole thing together. And lastly, I forgot what it is, but I might stop talking and we might go on to another piece.
Thank you. As Dom said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this instrument, which is one of the oldest surviving traditional Chinese instruments. It's called the guqin, or often just referred to as the qin. And it has a history of some 3,000 years. That's how old it is. Although initially it probably only had 5 strings, but it's been in its current form with 7 strings for more or less 2,000 years. Obviously not this particular instrument, which was made in the early 1990s, although it's probably older than a lot of you in the audience. Traditionally, the strings would have been silk, but around about the middle and the second half of the 20th century in China, somebody invented steel core nylon wound strings, which give a much louder sound and are more reliable in terms of staying in tune and are less susceptible to changing in different weather conditions. Unlike the silk strings, which are very temperamental and don't hold a steady pitch very well. I normally play on silk strings unless I'm doing collaboration with other musicians where I need to actually hold a steady pitch for more than 10 minutes. And so these are steel core, nylon wound strings. And as I said, they're much louder than the silk strings. But if Noel would turn off the amplification for a moment, you'll hear how quiet this is, even with the steel strings on it. So the qin traditionally is really for very small, intimate performances. And in fact, it's often primarily used for playing for oneself at home as a means of self-cultivation and sometimes just pure enjoyment of playing and listening and becoming one with the sound. And because the volume is so low traditionally, there are very subtle differences in timbre and ways of playing the strings, so that you have to listen very, very intently to appreciate the music. And in that way it becomes a kind of meditative pursuit. Just to give you an idea of the style of qin music, I'm going to play a short piece which is of a traditional repertoire. It was first published in 1614, and the title translates as An Introduction to a Beautiful Evening. So I'll just play that for you now. And I've chosen this one because it has a lot of representative techniques of qin playing. Thank you. The rest of the music that Dom and I are playing is improvised. But we do have a score. I mean, you might think that improvisation is something which can't be practiced, or you might think it can be practiced. Well, you can practice it, but it's going to sound different every time. But we're not just doing completely random things, although sometimes it may sound like it. We do get together and try a few things. And for example, the score of the first piece we played says here, soundscape, D, free rhythm. And that's pretty much all we need to know. The one we're about to do now is called a slow one in B. So we do have one or two parameters that we stick to.
Thank you. So we thought we'd end today with a pop medley. It's a joke. No? No? Sorry. The last one, piece we're going to do is closer to a blues form. In fact, that's our detailed note says that it's a blues. I mean, just a note on the improvising thing as well. As a long-term musician, it's something I worked out a long time ago that for me personally, I don't know if it works for everybody, but if I'm thrown into an environment where I have to create on the spot, I tend to come up with the best pieces of work that I can either they're either just a one-pass thing that it just happens, or there's something that I record and then take away and sort of edit and piece together and maybe rewrite to form something more of a song as such. But we're gonna end today with this piece that has no name. It's kind of a blues song. Thanks very much. Hope you all enjoyed it, folks. I think Tony might be starting this one off. I can't remember. Yeah. Okay.
Hello? Just before we start, you've probably noticed that in the traditional piece and in the pieces we've been playing together, I've been using both hands, obviously, and we have open strings on the chin. So it's tuned to a pentatonic scale. The left hand slides, can press the strings down to get different pitches, and it can also slide. The left hand can also pluck notes. It can also tap. So coming from nowhere, not plucking the string on that side. It can stop a note and tap and pluck. That sort of thing. And then we also have harmonics, quite a serious range of harmonics. So although it's a very quiet instrument, naturally it has a huge range of different timbres and different techniques which are applicable. Thank you. And thanks. I'd just like to reiterate Dom's words in thanking you all for being here. It's a great pleasure to be playing for you today. Thank you.
gonna tell you something again. The things that's going on today is not the blues. It's just a good beat that people is carrying. And I'm gonna tell you something again. The things that's going on today is not the blues. It's just a good beat that people is carrying. Queer sound. You see these electric guitars, they got them queer sound. Those people still understand. Queer sound. You see these electric guitars, they got them queer sound. Those people still understand. Queer sound, you see these electric guitars, queer sound. Those people still understand, you know what Why is that? If you ain't got no money, you got the blues, cause you thinking evil. Why is that? If you ain't got no money, you got the blues, cause you thinking evil. Why is that? If you ain't got no money, you got the blues, cause you thinking evil. But I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money to pay your house rent, you still got the blues. A lot of people talk about I don't like no blues, but when you ain't got no money and can't pay your house rent and can't buy you no blues, you damn sure got the blues. If you getting everything you possess and don't need nothing, you don't have no right to worry about nothing. just a good beat that people is carrying.
Thank you very much. Thanks for putting up with us. I know we're finished, but is there any questions that, as you're all students, is there any questions that anyone want to ask? There's no test at the end, don't worry. Oh, that's a good idea.
I'd never actually seen one in person until I went to China to study originally a different instrument, Chinese guitar, and Chinese compositions of Chinese instruments. And I went to Shanghai in 1985, and that's when I first saw one of these, and I started learning it at the beginning of 1986, quite some time. And it really grew on me after I started learning it. It's had a big influence on all the music I've played. Right? I'm originally a clarinet and saxophone player and composer in Western music. It's had a big influence on all of my musical activities.
And do you sort of use them as a meditation practice too?
Oh yeah. It just kind of it lends itself to that very, very.
All right. Well, anyway, thanks very much again, everyone. Thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed it. We really enjoyed playing for you. Good luck with your studies.